The widower hadn't smiled in years, until she left something warm on his porch. The first time Elias Mercer laughed after burying his wife, Clara Bennett nearly dropped the pie in her hands. It was not a loud laugh. It was only a rough, surprised sound, as though it had been locked inside his chest so long that it had forgotten how to come out. Yet on that cold October morning, with frost shining across the Wyoming grass and a restless horse shifting beside the barn, the sound seemed to change the whole valley. Clara stood at the bottom of his porch steps, holding a warm pear pie beneath a clean flour cloth. Elias leaned against the porch post. His gray shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows, and sawdust clung to one shoulder. At 52, he carried his years plainly. The wind had carved lines around his eyes, and grief had carved deeper ones around his mouth. He looked from Clara to the pie. Clara's fingers tightened beneath the pie plate. Elias smiled, because he believed it was a harmless joke. Clara did not smile back. "Maybe the folks in Red Hollow notice more than you do," she said. Before he could answer, she climbed the steps, placed the pie beside his coffee cup, and walked away. Elias watched her cross the narrow field between their properties. The hem of her brown dress moved against the pale grass. Her dark braid rested over one shoulder, and her boots left marks in the frost. He remained beside the porch post long, after she disappeared behind the cottonwood trees. Then his eyes returned to the pie. Something beneath the cloth had caught the morning light. A small silver button lay beside the crust. It was not one of Clara's. Elias picked it up and felt the warmth leave his face. He knew that button. His wife had sewn 6 just like it onto her blue winter coat. That coat had been buried in a cedar chest for 4 years. Clara Bennett had lived at Willow Creek Farm since she was 7 years old. Her father had raised horses, her mother had grown herbs, and Clara had learned early that land did not care whether the hands working it belonged to a man or a woman. By 29, she could mend a harness, bargain over cattle, set a broken gate, and tell from the smell of the wind whether snow would arrive before sunset. The people of Red Hollow admired her strength when speaking to her face. Behind her back, they called it stubbornness. They also wondered why she had not married. Clara had received proposals, 3 serious ones and several foolish ones. She had refused them all without cruelty and without regret. What no one knew was that 4 years earlier, on a rainy spring evening, Ruth Mercer had held Clara's hand beside a dying fire and made her promise something. Ruth had been Elias' wife for 26 years. She had also been Clara's closest friend. There had been 23 years between the two women, but friendship did not always count years the way townspeople did. Ruth had taught Clara how to make pear preserves without burning the sugar. Clara had read aloud to Ruth when illness made her eyes ache. They had shared recipes, silences, fears, and truths that neither spoke anywhere else. On their final evening together, Ruth had given Clara a sealed letter. "Not yet," she had whispered. Clara had looked at the envelope. Elias' name was written across it in Ruth's careful hand. "When should I give it to him?" Ruth's breathing had been shallow, but her answer was clear. "When he learns to laugh again." Clara had kept the letter hidden in the bottom drawer of her kitchen cabinet for 4 years. That morning, when Elias laughed over the pie, the promise had returned to her with such force that she could barely breathe. But she had not brought the letter. Not yet. She had only brought the silver button. It had fallen from the envelope when Clara checked it before leaving home. Ruth must have placed it inside as a keepsake. Clara had searched the kitchen floor, the porch, and the path near her gate, never realizing it had slipped beneath the cloth covering the pie. Now Elias stood on his porch, holding a piece of his dead wife's coat. And Clara knew he would come looking for an answer. She reached Willow Creek and closed the gate behind her. Her mare, Daisy, raised her head from the fence and gave a soft nicker. Clara stroked the white mark between the animal's eyes, though her attention remained fixed across the field. Elias had not moved. Even from that distance, she could see the silver button in his hand. A cold wind moved down from the hills, stirring dust along the road. The lantern hanging beneath Clara's porch gave a small creak. She went inside and opened the bottom kitchen drawer. The letter was where she had left it, beneath her mother's old linen napkins. The paper had yellowed at the edges. The red wax seal remained unbroken. Clara lifted it with trembling fingers. She had imagined this moment many times. In some versions, Elias accepted the letter quietly. In others, he became angry that she had kept it from him. In the worst version, he read Ruth's final words and closed his heart forever. A hoof struck hard ground outside. Clara froze. Another hoofbeat followed, then another. Elias was not walking across the field. He was riding. By the time Clara reached the window, he had already passed the cottonwood trees. His black gelding moved at a hard pace, throwing frost and dirt behind him. Elias sat straight in the saddle, hat pulled low, one hand closed tightly around something small. The silver button. Clara looked down at the sealed letter. Then came the sound of his horse stopping outside her house. For 4 years, Elias Mercer had never crossed her field without being invited. That morning, he did not wait for an invitation. His boots struck the porch. The door shook beneath 3 heavy knocks. "Clara," he called, his voice low and unsteady, "open this door and tell me where you found it." Clara stood in the middle of her kitchen with Ruth Mercer's letter pressed against her palm. The knocking came again. "Clara." There was no anger in Elias' voice now. That made it worse. Anger could be answered, grief could not. She crossed the room and opened the door. Elias stood beneath the porch roof with his hat in one hand and the silver button in the other. His horse waited near the hitching rail, breathing white clouds into the cold air. A leather strap creaked as the animal shifted its weight. Elias held out the button. "Where did you get this?" Clara looked at his face. The rare softness from earlier was gone. His eyes had become guarded, searching every movement she made. "It belonged to Ruth," Clara said. "I know who it belonged to." He spoke quietly, but the words struck harder than a shout. Clara stepped back from the doorway. "You should come inside. I'd rather hear the answer first." The wind lifted the edge of his coat. Dust scraped across the porch boards. Clara had spent 4 years preparing to speak about the letter. She had never prepared to explain the button. "Ruth gave it to me," she said. Elias' hand closed around it. "When?" Clara hesitated. That single pause gave him more of an answer than she wanted. His face changed. "You had this before she died." "Yes." He looked past Clara into the house, then back at her. "What else did she give you?" Clara's grip tightened around the envelope. Elias noticed. His gaze lowered to her hand. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said, "Is that from her?" Clara moved aside. Elias entered the kitchen without removing his coat. He did not sit. He stood near the table, carrying the cold in with him. The room suddenly felt too small. Clara placed the letter on the table between them. Elias stared at his name written across the front. Ruth's handwriting was thin and neat, every letter leaning slightly to the right. Clara watched recognition move through him slowly. His shoulders stiffened, his jaw tightened. "You've had this for 4 years." "Yes." "Why?" "She made me promise not to give it to you until the right time." His eyes rose to hers. "And you decided this morning was the right time." "No, I decided this morning might be close." He gave a short breath that held no humor. "Close to what?" Clara looked toward the window. Outside, the field stretched pale beneath the morning sky. The Mercer barn stood across the distance like a dark shape from another life. "She told me to wait until you laughed again." Elias said nothing. Clara continued carefully. The button must have been inside the envelope. It fell out while I was checking the seal before I brought the pie. You were going to bring me the letter. I thought I might. But you didn't. No. He looked at the envelope again. Why not? Because laughing once is not the same as being ready. The muscles in his face tightened. You had no right to decide what I was ready for. Clara absorbed the words without looking away. I know. That answer seemed to unsettle him more than an argument would have. He turned from the table and walked to the stove. The fire cracked behind the iron door. A pot of coffee sat near the edge, and beside it lay a folded towel Clara had used while baking. Everything in the room was ordinary. Nothing in it felt ordinary anymore. Elias spoke with his back to her. What did Ruth tell you before she died? Many things. About me. Yes. He turned. What things? Clara felt the old promise pressing against her ribs. Ruth had trusted her with words meant for another time. Perhaps that time had come. Perhaps it had not. She was worried you would turn your grief into a home and never leave it. Elias looked toward the floor. Clara continued. She said you would keep working because work asks nothing from a man except his strength. She said you would avoid people because people ask for truth. His mouth tightened. That sounds like Ruth. She knew you. She was my wife. And she loved you. The words softened the room, but only for a moment. Elias returned to the table. His fingers hovered over the letter but did not touch it. What does it say? I don't know. You never opened it. No. He looked at her sharply. I gave her my word. His hand settled against the table beside the envelope. Clara saw the scar across his knuckles, old and pale. Ruth had once told her Elias got it repairing a broken plow during their first winter on the ranch. He had worked until his hand bled because a storm was coming, and they could not afford to lose the field. That was the man Clara knew. That was the man she had loved in silence for longer than she dared admit. Elias pulled out a chair and sat. The anger had gone from him. In its place was something quieter and more dangerous. Fear. What if I don't want to read it? Clara sat across from him. Then you don't. What if I read it and it changes everything? It might. He stared at Ruth's name pressed into the wax seal. I spent 4 years learning how to live without hearing her voice. Clara's own voice lowered. A letter is not a voice. It can be close enough. Outside, Elias' horse stamped once against the frozen ground. The kitchen clock marked the seconds with small, steady clicks. Elias lifted the envelope. His thumb rested beneath the edge of the seal. Then a wagon rattled into Clara's yard. Both of them turned toward the window. A well-dressed man climbed down from the driver's seat carrying a bundle wrapped in brown paper. His coat was new, his boots polished, and the silver pin on his neckcloth caught the light. Caleb Dawson, the banker's son. The man half of Red Hollow expected Clara to marry. Elias looked from Caleb to the unopened letter in his hand. Then Caleb saw Elias' horse outside and stopped beside the gate. His expression changed. Clara knew that look. By sunset, the whole town would know Elias Mercer had spent the morning inside her house with the door closed. Elias placed the letter back on the table. The wax seal remained unbroken. I should go, he said. Clara rose. Elias, wait. But he was already reaching for his hat. And the letter Ruth had guarded for 4 years remained between them, unopened and heavier than before. Caleb Dawson removed his hat as Elias stepped onto the porch. For one brief moment, the two men faced each other in the pale morning light. Caleb was 31, clean-shaven, broad-shouldered, and dressed as though he expected every room to receive him kindly. Elias wore dust on his boots and a coat faded by years of weather. One man looked like the future Red Hollow would choose for Clara. The other looked like a past she had never been able to leave behind. "Morning, Mr. Mercer," Caleb said. Elias gave a small nod. "Dawson." Caleb glanced toward the open doorway. Clara stood just inside, one hand resting against the frame. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "You are," Elias said. Clara saw surprise flash across Caleb's face. Elias was not rude by nature. He was simply too tired to polish the truth. He stepped down from the porch and untied his horse. "Elias," Clara called. He paused but did not turn. "The letter belongs to you." His hand tightened around the reins. "Then keep it safe a little longer." He mounted and rode out of the yard without looking back. Clara watched until the cottonwoods hid him from view. Caleb remained near the gate, holding the brown paper bundle beneath one arm. "That seemed serious," he said. "It was. Should I come another time?" Clara wanted to say yes. Instead, she looked at the package in his hands and remembered the kindness he had shown her over the past year. Caleb had never pressed when she refused an invitation. He had helped her arrange a loan after a late frost damaged half her pear crop. He had spoken to her as an equal when other men treated her farm as a problem waiting for a husband. He deserved more than a closed door. "You may as well come in," she said. Inside, Caleb placed the parcel on the kitchen table. The letter still lay near the edge, Ruth's name hidden beneath Clara's hand as she quietly moved it into the drawer. "I brought coffee beans," Caleb said. "The new shipment from Cheyenne. My father says they are the finest we've had." "That was thoughtful." He smiled. Clara fetched 2 cups, though she did not want coffee. Her mind was across the field, following Elias home. Caleb watched her pour. "Did I cause trouble?" "No." That answer sounded like trouble. Clara set the pot down. Elias found something that belonged to Ruth. Caleb's expression softened. "I see." He did not ask for details, and Clara was grateful. They sat opposite each other. The morning light fell across the table, touching the place where the letter had been. Caleb spoke first. "The winter gathering is in 3 weeks. I remember. I thought perhaps you might attend with me." Clara looked into her cup. The town had been expecting this question, so had she. Still, hearing it made the kitchen feel smaller. "I haven't decided whether I'm going." "Then decide to go." His tone was gentle, but hope sat plainly in his eyes. Caleb Dawson was not foolish. He knew she cared for Elias, even if he did not yet know how deeply. Clara had begun to suspect that half the town knew, and the only man who remained uncertain was Elias himself. Caleb rested his hands on the table. "I'm not asking you to promise me anything." That is what people say when they want a promise later. He gave a quiet laugh. "You always did see through me. I try to see everyone clearly. Do you see Mercer clearly?" The question struck closer than she expected. Clara looked toward the window. Across the field, a rider entered the Mercer yard and disappeared behind the barn. "Yes," she said. Caleb followed her gaze. "Then perhaps that is the difficulty." She turned back to him. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes seeing a man clearly does not mean he is able to see himself." Clara said nothing. Caleb leaned back, his chair creaking beneath him. "My mother waited 11 years for my father to become the man she believed he could be. He never did." "Elias is not your father." "No, but waiting can become a habit, Clara." There was no cruelty in his voice, only concern. That made his words harder to dismiss. He rose and picked up his hat. "Come to the gathering with me, dance once, drink cider. Let the town talk about something harmless for an evening. Clara almost refused. Then she thought of Elias leaving with grief in his face, unwilling to open the letter and unwilling to stay. Perhaps Caleb was right about one thing. A woman could spend too much of her life waiting for a closed door to open. "I'll think about it," she said. His smile held more relief than victory. "I'll take that." After he left, Clara stood alone beside the table. She opened the drawer and took out Ruth's letter. For the first time, she noticed a faint mark near the lower corner of the envelope. It was not a stain or a tear. It was a line of writing, small enough to miss unless the paper caught the light. Clara carried it to the window. 4 words had been written there in Ruth's hand. "Not for him alone." Clara's breath caught. She turned the envelope over. There beneath the wax seal was another name. Her own. The letter had not been meant only for Elias. Ruth had written it for both of them. Clara lowered herself into the chair. Her thoughts returned to Ruth's final evening, to the weak hand holding hers, to the words she had remembered for 4 years. "When he learns to laugh again." But perhaps Clara had remembered only part of what Ruth meant. Perhaps the letter was never supposed to be handed over and forgotten. Perhaps it was meant to be opened with Elias sitting across from her. A gust of wind pressed against the house. The lantern outside swung on its hook. Then Clara saw movement beyond the field. Elias had come back out of his barn. He stood motionless near the fence between their properties, facing her house. Even from that distance, Clara could feel the weight of his gaze. If you have ever carried words meant for the right moment, stay with this story, because some truths do not wait forever. Clara stepped onto the porch with the letter in her hand. Elias did not move. Neither did she. Between them lay a field, 4 years of silence, and the name of a dead woman who had somehow written them into the same final message. Elias remained at the fence until the cold reached through his coat. Across the field, Clara stood on her porch with Ruth's letter in her hand. Neither called out. The distance between them was not far. A man could cross it in less than 5 minutes, yet Elias felt as though the field had widened into miles. He had spent 4 years avoiding the room where Ruth's dresses still hung behind a closed door. 4 years eating supper at the end of a table built for 2. 4 years waking before dawn because sleep had become a place where the past spoke too clearly. Now that past waited in Clara Bennett's hand. His old mare nudged his shoulder from behind the fence. Elias rested a palm against her neck, grateful for the ordinary warmth of the animal. "What would you have me do?" he murmured. The mare lowered her head toward the grass. Ruth would have laughed at him for asking a horse. She had always believed Elias knew the right thing before he was willing to admit it. During their marriage, she had called his long silences Mercer storms, because they gathered slowly and left everyone waiting for thunder. He had loved her for that kind of truth. He feared the letter for the same reason. Clara stepped off her porch. The envelope was held against her chest as she crossed the field. Wind moved through the dry grass around her boots. A strand of dark hair had come loose from her braid and brushed her cheek, but she did not lift a hand to fix it. Elias opened the gate before she reached it. She stopped on the other side. "I found something on the envelope," she said. His eyes settled on the letter. "What?" "My name." He looked at her. Clara turned the envelope so he could see the small writing beneath the seal. "Not for him alone." Below it, faint but unmistakable, was Clara's name. Elias read it twice. "Was that there this morning?" "Yes, I never noticed it before." "You kept the letter 4 years and never saw your own name." "It was hidden beneath the fold." He studied her face, looking for something he could not name. "What did Ruth tell you?" "I already told you what I remember." "That isn't what I asked." Clara's shoulders stiffened. She told me to wait until you laughed again. And nothing else. Clara looked toward the mountains. The highest ridge had disappeared behind gathering clouds. Snow would come before nightfall. She was weak, Clara said. Her words were broken. I may have missed something. Elias heard the uncertainty in her voice. He also heard fear. Why would Ruth write to both of us? I don't know. You must have some thought. I have several, none of them feel safe. His expression hardened slightly. Safe for whom? Clara looked back at him. For you, for me, for the memory of a woman we both loved. The gate stood open between them. Elias leaned one hand against the post. Ruth was my wife. I know. You were her friend. I know that too. His gaze dropped to the envelope. And you have been carrying her last words all this time. Clara's fingers trembled once before becoming still. I carried them because she asked me to. Or because you were afraid of what they said. The question landed more sharply than Elias intended. Clara's face changed. She stepped back from the gate. I never opened it. I believe you. But you don't trust me. I don't know what I trust this morning. A silence spread between them. The mare shifted behind Elias. Far across the valley, a loose shutter struck the side of Clara's barn. Clara held out the letter. Then take it. Elias did not move. It has your name too. Perhaps that was Ruth's mistake. Clara's voice became quiet. Ruth did not make many mistakes. No. Especially with people. That truth struck both of them. Elias looked at the handwriting again. Ruth had known Clara since the girl was young enough to sit on a flour barrel while learning to make biscuits. She had trusted Clara with her pain, her home, and apparently her final message. Elias wondered what his wife had seen that he had not. The thought made him uneasy. I'll open it, he said. Clara's breath caught. But not here. Where? At the house. She looked across the field toward the Mercer place. The kitchen window reflected the darkening sky. Behind it waited the table where Ruth had once kneaded bread and scolded Elias for bringing muddy boots indoors. Beyond the kitchen was the hallway leading to the closed room. Clara had not entered the house since Ruth's burial. She had brought food to the porch, repaired a broken gate, and spoken with Elias beneath open sky. She had never crossed that doorway again. I don't know if I can, she said. Elias' voice softened. Then neither of us is ready. He began to close the gate. Clara placed her hand against it. No. He stopped. She swallowed and looked toward the house. I have waited 4 years for the moment Ruth chose. I will not turn away because it frightens me. Elias watched the color leave her face. There was something she had not told him. He was certain of it now. They walked across the field together. No one spoke. The first snowflake fell as they reached the Mercer porch. It landed on the railing and disappeared into the wood. Elias opened the front door. Cold stillness greeted them from inside. The house smelled of pine boards, coffee, and the faint lavender scent that had never fully left Ruth's things. Clara stopped in the entryway. Her eyes went to a blue shawl hanging from a hook beside the stairs. Elias had forgotten it was there. Clara touched the edge of it with 2 fingers. She wore this the last night I saw her, she whispered. Elias turned slowly. You were here that night. Clara's hand fell away from the shawl. She realized too late what she had revealed. Elias stepped closer. The doctor told me no one came after supper. Clara could not meet his eyes. Outside, snow began tapping softly against the windows. Elias' voice dropped. What happened in this house after I went for the doctor? Clara held Ruth's sealed letter between them. And for the first time in 4 years, she understood that the greatest secret was not written inside it. Clara kept her eyes on the blue shawl. The house had not changed as much as she expected. The clock still stood on the mantel. Ruth's copper kettle still hung near the stove. A narrow crack still crossed the white bowl beside the window, the one Elias had promised to replace and Ruth had refused to throw away. Yet everything felt smaller without her. Elias closed the door against the snow. "What happened that night?" he asked again. Clara's fingers tightened around the letter. "Ruth sent you for the doctor." "I know." She knew he would not return in time. Elias' face became still. "You cannot know that." She knew. His jaw moved, but he said nothing. Clara crossed to the kitchen table and placed the envelope beside the cold lamp. Her legs felt weak, though she forced herself to remain standing. "Ruth asked me to come after supper," she said. "She sent a boy from the Miller place with a note." Elias stared at her. "You were here while I was gone." "Yes." "Why did no one tell me?" "She made me promise not to." His hand struck the back of a chair. The sound cracked through the room. Clara flinched. Elias saw it and immediately stepped away. "I'm not angry with you," he said. But they both knew that was not entirely true. He was angry with the room, with the doctor, with the winter road, with Ruth for hiding something, with himself for leaving when she had asked him to go. He pulled the chair out and sat heavily. Clara remained across from him. She was frightened, Clara said. Ruth was never frightened. She was that night. The truth seemed to wound him more than anything else. Elias lowered his gaze to his hands. What was she afraid of? "Leaving you alone." Snow whispered against the window. Clara remembered Ruth beneath the quilt, her face pale in the lamplight. Her breathing had been thin and uneven. Still, she had watched the door as though Elias might return at any moment. "She said you would blame yourself," Clara continued. "She said you would remember every harsh word and forget every kind one." Elias gave a bitter shake of his head. "She knew me well. She also said you would refuse help from anyone who offered it." His eyes lifted. "Is that why you started bringing food?" "At first. And later." Clara looked at the sealed letter. The room seemed to wait with him. "Later, I came because I wanted to." Elias did not ask what she meant. Perhaps he was afraid to. Clara drew a breath. "Ruth asked me to sit beside her. She gave me the letter and the silver button. She said the button came from the coat you bought her during your first winter here." Elias looked down at the small piece of silver still resting in his palm. "I traded a saddle for that coat." "She told me." "She said I was a fool." "She said you were a generous fool." Something almost moved at the corner of his mouth, but grief stopped it. Clara went on. "She made me promise I would wait until you laughed again. Then she said something else." Elias looked up sharply. "What?" Clara pressed her palm against the edge of the table. "She said, when he laughs, he will believe he has survived me. That is when he will need the truth." Elias stared at the envelope. "What truth?" "I don't know. You said the greatest secret wasn't inside the letter." "I was wrong to say that." "You said it because you meant it." Clara looked toward the hallway. The door at the far end remained shut. "Ruth's room. I meant that there was something else I never told you." Elias rose slowly. "What?" Clara could hear her own heartbeat. "Before she gave me the letter, Ruth asked me a question." He waited. "She asked whether I loved you." The wind pushed against the house. The lamp chimney gave a faint rattle. Elias did not move. Clara wished he would turn away. Anger would have been easier. Disbelief would have been easier. Instead, he looked at her with the stunned silence of a man who had opened a door in his own home and found another life waiting behind it. "What did you say?" he asked. "I told her it did not matter." That was not an answer. "No." "What did you say after that?" Clara's voice nearly failed. "I said yes." Elias turned toward the window. His shoulders rose and fell once. Clara watched him struggle with the weight of it. Ruth had known. Ruth had asked. Ruth had placed a letter between them and chosen a future neither had dared imagine. "I was ashamed," Clara said. "She was dying and I loved her. I had no right to feel anything for you." Elias faced her again. "How long?" "I don't know." "That is not true." She lowered her eyes. "Since before she became ill." Pain crossed his face. Clara quickly continued. "I never acted on it. I never wanted her place. I never wished for this house or her life. I tried to stay away, but Ruth noticed everything." "Yes," Elias said quietly, "she did. She took my hand and told me love was not a theft unless I made it one." Elias closed his eyes. Clara remembered Ruth's weak fingers tightening around hers. "She said she was not asking me to wait for you. She was asking me not to punish myself if one day you saw me differently." Elias opened his eyes. "And have I?" The question carried no accusation. Only fear. Clara looked at him fully. "This morning when you laughed, I thought perhaps you had." For a moment, the room held nothing but the snow and the space between them. Then Elias reached for the letter. His thumb pressed against the red wax. Clara placed her hand over his. "Wait." He looked at her. "If we open it," she said, "we cannot return to what we were yesterday." Elias' gaze moved to her hand resting on his. "I don't think yesterday is waiting for us. If you believe some truths arrive only when the heart is ready to bear them, stay with Clara and Elias, because Ruth's final words are about to change more than either of them understands." Elias broke the seal. The sound was small, but in the quiet house, it felt like a branch snapping beneath the weight of winter. He unfolded the first page. Clara stood beside him as Ruth Mercer's final message opened between them. The first line was written to Elias. The second was written to Clara. The third line made Elias stop breathing. Because Ruth had not written about love. She had written about a child. Elias read the third line again. Then a third time. The words did not change. Clara stood beside him, close enough to hear the paper tremble in his hands. "My dearest Elias and my dear Clara, there is something I kept from both of you. Before I became too weak to travel, I learned that my sister's little girl was still alive." Elias lowered the page. Ruth's sister had no child. Clara looked at him. "She did." His eyes hardened. "No, Martha died in Kansas before Ruth and I were married. There was no child." Clara turned back to the letter. "Keep reading." Elias did not move. The snow pressed white against the windows. Somewhere in the walls, old timber gave a slow creak. At last, he lifted the page again. Martha gave birth during the winter of 1868. She was unmarried and frightened. Our father would not allow the baby's name to be spoken in the house. He arranged for the child to be taken west with a church family. Martha died believing her daughter had been lost to fever. Years later, I learned that was not true. Elias' face had gone pale. Clara's hand found the back of a chair. Ruth had never spoken of a sister's child. Not to Clara. Not even during the long nights when illness loosened old memories. Elias continued. "Her name was Anna. She grew up under another name. I found her only once. By then she had a daughter of her own." The room seemed to tilt. Clara whispered, "A daughter." Elias looked at her. Something passed between them, quick and frightening. He read the next line. That child is Clara Bennett. Clara stepped back so suddenly that the chair scraped across the floor. No. The word came out thin. Elias stared at the page, then at her. Clara shook her head. My mother was Helen Bennett. I know. My mother was born in Missouri. Elias looked down at the letter. Ruth says Anna Bennett was the name Martha's child took after marriage. Clara's breath became shallow. That cannot be true. But even as she spoke, old memories stirred. Her mother's silence whenever Clara asked about grandparents. A locked wooden box beneath her parents' bed. A faded photograph of a young woman standing beside a church wagon. The way Helen Bennett had once wept after seeing Ruth across the market square, then claimed dust had entered her eye. Clara moved toward the window. Outside, the world had disappeared beneath falling snow. The field between the farms was fading, fence posts becoming gray shapes in the storm. She knew, Clara said. Your mother's. Maybe. She pressed both hands against the window frame. My mother knew Ruth before I did. They spoke privately sometimes. I thought they were discussing herbs or church matters. Elias returned to the letter. His voice was rough when he read aloud. Clara, your mother asked me never to tell you while she lived. She feared that the truth would make you feel unwanted. You were never unwanted. You were hidden by people who mistook shame for righteousness. None of that shame belongs to you. Clara closed her eyes. Her parents had moved to Oregon 6 years earlier after selling most of their livestock. They had written often at first. Then the letters had become less frequent. Her father's health had worsened. Her mother's last letter had arrived in spring, full of ordinary things and one strange sentence Clara had read many times without understanding. Some families begin with blood and some begin with mercy. Most begin with both. Now the words made sense. Elias turned the page. There was more. Elias, this makes Clara part of my family, not by marriage, not by charity, by blood. I tell you because Red Hollow will use every reason it can find to make her doubt her own heart. Do not let my memory become another reason. Elias stopped. Clara turned from the window. What does that mean? He kept reading silently. Elias. His jaw tightened. She crossed the room and took hold of the page. Read it aloud. He did not release it. Ruth knew, he said. Knew what? He looked at Clara with a pain deeper than surprise. She knew how you felt. Clara's face warmed with shame, though she had already confessed it. She asked me. No, before that. Clara went still. Elias handed her the letter. Near the bottom of the page, Ruth's handwriting had grown weaker, the lines sloping downward. I saw it long before either of you admitted it. Clara never dishonored me, not in thought or deed. Elias never encouraged what he did not understand. Love can arrive at the wrong hour and still be honest. I do not ask you to choose each other. I ask you not to reject what is true merely because I was loved first. Clara's eyes filled. She lowered the page. For 4 years, she had feared that loving Elias made her disloyal to Ruth. Ruth had carried no such judgment. The truth should have freed her. Instead, it opened a different wound. Why would she put this burden on you? Clara asked. Elias looked toward Ruth's blue shawl. She was trying to remove one. Clara folded the pages carefully. There must be more. A second sheet remained inside the envelope. Elias drew it out. Unlike the first, this page was addressed to only one person. Clara Bennett. Clara took it with both hands. The first line spoke of her mother, of the hidden family connection, of forgiveness. Then Ruth's words changed. Clara's face tightened as she read. Elias watched her. What is it? She did not answer. Clara. Her eyes reached the final line. A small sound escaped her, half breath and half grief. Then she folded the page before Elias could see it. He stepped closer. What did Ruth write? Clara pressed the letter against her chest. She asked me to do something. What? Clara looked at him, tears standing in her eyes. She asked me to leave Red Hollow if you ever mistook gratitude for love. Elias went still. And how were you meant to know the difference? Clara glanced toward the pie cooling on his kitchen counter, then at the house where Ruth's presence still lived in every quiet corner. That, she whispered, is what frightens me. Outside, the storm erased the path between their homes. Inside, Elias understood that Clara might leave before he discovered what was truly in his heart. The storm did not ease. By noon, snow had covered the fence line and buried the path Clara had walked only an hour earlier. Wind pressed against the house in long, low gusts. The windows rattled in their frames, and the barn vanished behind a white curtain. Elias added another piece of wood to the stove. You cannot cross back in this, he said. Clara stood near the kitchen table, still holding Ruth's private page. My animals are alone. I'll see to them when the wind drops. They need feed before dark. So do mine. I know how to care for my own stock. Elias shut the stove door harder than necessary. I did not say you didn't. Clara looked toward the window. The storm had trapped them together inside a house filled with memory, unanswered questions, and a warning written by a dead woman. She folded Ruth's page and placed it back inside the envelope. Elias watched her. You should let me read it. It was written to me. It concerns both of us. Not every thought Ruth had belongs to you. The words came out sharper than Clara intended. Elias turned away. No, he said, I suppose they don't. Silence gathered between them. Clara hated it at once. She crossed to the counter and removed the cloth from the pear pie. One side had broken where the plate struck the porch railing earlier. The crust was no longer perfect, though the smell of baked fruit and cinnamon still warmed the room. She searched the cupboard for plates. The first one she found had blue flowers around the edge. Ruth's plate. Clara froze. Elias noticed. She used those on Sundays, he said. I remember. You may use it. Clara set it down carefully. It feels wrong. Leaving it untouched forever feels wrong too. His voice held no anger now, only weariness. She cut 2 pieces of pie. Elias sat at the table while Clara placed a slice before him. For a moment, neither ate. Then Elias picked up his fork. The first bite changed something in his face. Clara saw him remember. Ruth taught you this crust, he said. Yes. She always added too much salt. She said sweet things needed something honest beside them. Elias lowered his fork. That sounds like her. Clara sat across from him. The wind struck the house again. A lantern hanging near the back door moved slightly on its hook. Elias looked at the pie. I know that too. He lifted his eyes. But when you answered me, I thought about it. Clara's hand became still beside her plate. For how long? All morning. That is not very long. No. He took a breath. But it was longer than I expected. Clara looked down. A small warmth moved through her, followed quickly by fear. That may be gratitude. Elias leaned back in his chair. You have decided that already. I have decided nothing. Ruth asked you to leave if I mistook one thing for another. Yes. How exactly am I meant to prove the difference? Clara looked at him. You are not meant to prove anything today. Then when? When you no longer have to ask. The answer frustrated him. She could see it in the way he pressed his thumb against the scar on his knuckle. Clara, I am not a man who receives certainty like a bolt of lightning. No, you receive it like winter, slowly until everything is covered. His eyes held hers. That sounded like Ruth. She knew you better than anyone. Perhaps. The single word carried something Clara had not expected. Doubt. Elias looked toward the closed hallway door. For 4 years, I believed I had known everything important about my wife. Today I learned she had another family, another secret, and a plan for my life she never spoke aloud. She did not plan your life. She placed you inside a letter and waited for me to become ready. She gave us permission. That is not the same as a command. Elias stood and walked to the window. What if I never become ready? Clara's throat tightened. Then I leave. He turned sharply. You would truly go. I will not spend my life waiting for you to decide whether I am a woman or a kindness. The words hung between them. Elias' face changed. Clara felt tears threaten, but she refused to let them fall. I brought meals because you were grieving, she continued. I fixed your gate because it needed fixing. I listened because you had no one else to speak to, but I did not do those things so you would owe me love. I know that. Do you? Yes. His answer came with enough force that she believed him. Elias crossed the room but stopped several feet away. I know because pity has a different face. Clara said nothing. I saw pity every time I went into town after Ruth died. People lowered their voices. They touched my arm. They looked at me as if grief had made me less of a man. His gaze softened. You never did. Clara's breathing became unsteady. You argued about cattle prices. You told me my roof was foolish. You laughed when I burned coffee. It was terrible coffee. It was. A faint smile passed between them, fragile and brief. Then Elias looked at her with painful honesty. I do not know what this feeling is yet. Clara nodded. That is the first true answer you have given me. He accepted the rebuke. Outside, the wind began to weaken. Through the glass, the barn slowly appeared again. Elias reached for his coat. I'll go feed both herds. You cannot see the ground. I know every step between here and your barn. So do I. You are staying inside. Clara raised an eyebrow. Elias sighed. You may come if you choose. She took her coat from the hook. They stepped into the storm together. The snow reached Clara's ankles. Elias walked ahead, breaking a path, while she followed close enough to see the outline of his shoulders. Halfway across the field, a sound rose above the wind. A horse cried out from Clara's barn. Not a normal call. A frightened one. Clara began to run. When they reached the door, the latch hung broken from the wood. Inside, the feed bins had been opened. Tack lay scattered across the floor, and Clara's mare was trembling in her stall. Elias lifted the lantern. On the wall above the empty grain chest, someone had carved 4 words into the timber. Leave the Mercer secret buried. Clara stared at the words carved into the barn wall. Leave the Mercer secret buried. The letters were deep and uneven, cut by someone in a hurry or someone angry enough not to care whether the knife slipped. Elias set the lantern on a barrel. Stay behind me. Clara stepped beside him instead. This is my barn. And whoever did this may still be close. They listened. The mare shifted in her stall. Leather straps moved softly where they had been thrown across the floor. Snow blew through the broken latch and gathered in a thin white line near the door. No footsteps came from outside. No shadow moved behind the stalls. Elias crossed the barn slowly, checking each dark corner. He found the back door open and one set of boot prints leading toward the creek. The storm was already covering them. Clara crouched beside the disturbed grain chest. Nothing was taken. Elias looked around. They did not come to steal. They came to frighten me. Yes. His voice carried a quiet anger that Clara had never heard before. She rose and brushed straw from her skirt. Who knew about Ruth's family? Her father, perhaps, her mother, anyone involved in sending Martha's child away. They would be old now. Old men can still carry fear. Clara looked again at the warning. Why threaten me after all these years? Elias picked up a broken leather strap. Because the letter was opened today. Clara turned to him. No one saw us open it. Someone saw me come to your house. Someone saw us return here together. Caleb. Elias' jaw tightened. Caleb saw enough to talk. He would not do this. You trust him. I do. That is not the same as knowing him. Clara studied Elias' face. And you think jealousy made him break into my barn? I think a man who wants something may surprise you when he feels it slipping away. The accusation stirred anger in her. Caleb has treated me with respect. So did whoever carved those words until today. That is unfair. Perhaps. Elias lifted the lantern again. But fairness will not keep you safe. Clara stepped closer. I do not need you deciding whom I should fear. His eyes met hers. No, but you may need someone willing to stand beside you while you decide. The words took some of the heat from her anger. Outside, the wind had weakened to a low moan. Snow still fell, but the valley had become visible again. Elias repaired the latch with spare wire while Clara calmed the horses. Her mare pressed her nose against Clara's shoulder, trembling less with each stroke. Near the stall door, Clara noticed something caught beneath the straw. A strip of dark green cloth. She picked it up. The fabric was fine wool, not work cloth. One edge had been torn recently. Elias examined it beneath the lantern. Recognize it? Clara did. At the church social the previous winter, Judge Walter Pike had worn a dark green coat with silver buttons. He had stood beside the stove telling anyone who would listen that Red Hollow had been built by respectable families who knew how to keep shame from spreading. Judge Pike was also the oldest living member of the church council. And his father had served as a church elder in Kansas during the year Martha Mercer's baby disappeared. Clara closed her fist around the fabric. Walter Pike. Elias' face became hard. You are certain? I repaired a tear in his sleeve last January. His housekeeper had injured her hand, and he asked me to help. Where was the tear? Near the cuff. Elias took the cloth from her. This came from the lower edge of a coat. Then perhaps it is not his. Or perhaps it is. Clara leaned against the stall. For years, Judge Pike had spoken kindly to her. He bought pears from her farm. He praised her father. Once, when her wagon broke outside town, he had waited beside her until help came. The thought of him entering her barn with a knife felt impossible. Then she remembered Ruth's words. You were hidden by people who mistook shame for righteousness. What if his father helped send Martha's child away? Clara asked. Elias looked toward the warning. Then Walter may believe the truth threatens his family's name. What truth? That frightened people abandon a baby. In towns like Red Hollow, names are treated like property. Men will do ugly things to protect what they believe belongs to them. Clara's gaze returned to the carved words. She no longer felt frightened. She felt watched. That evening, after the animals were fed and the barn secured, Elias insisted Clara return to his house. She resisted until they found another sign near her back door. A muddy boot mark on the porch. Someone had stood there long enough for the snow to melt beneath the heel. Clara packed a small bag without argument. At the Mercer house, Elias placed a chair beneath the front latch and checked every window twice. Clara sat at the kitchen table with Ruth's letter open before her. "There is another name here," she said. Elias joined her. Near the bottom of Ruth's first page, hidden within a sentence about the Kansas church family, were the words Reverend Samuel Pike. Elias read them slowly. Walter's father. Clara nodded. Ruth had not named him as an enemy. She had only written that Samuel Pike arranged the journey west. But beneath the name was a faint line in different ink. He kept a record. Clara looked up. What record? Elias thought for a moment. Church councils kept books, births, burials, transfers, donations. Where would those books be now? The old chapel burned down. Not all of it. Elias understood. The chapel bell and several storage trunks had been moved into the courthouse basement after the fire. A place Judge Pike controlled. Clara folded the letter. We need that record. Elias shook his head. Not tonight. Tomorrow. Clara. If someone broke into my barn to keep this hidden, then Ruth was not the only person who knew. Elias looked at the dark window. And whoever came may try again. Clara reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Then we do not give them another chance to frighten us apart. He looked down at her hand. This time he did not pull away. If you believe truth should not be buried just because powerful people fear it, keep following Clara and Elias, because the next name they uncover will change Red Hollow forever. A heavy knock struck the front door. Both of them froze. Then a man's voice came through the wood. Elias Mercer, open up. Judge Pike has accused Clara Bennett of stealing church property, and I have orders to take her into custody. Elias moved toward the door, but Clara caught his sleeve. Do not open it yet. The knock came again. Mercer, the voice called. This is Deputy Owen Price. I know you're inside. Elias recognized him. Owen had grown up 3 farms east of Red Hollow and had once helped Elias pull a calf from a flooded ditch. He was not a cruel man, but he wore the law heavily, as though afraid it might slip from his shoulders if he questioned it. Elias lowered his voice. Stay behind me. Clara gave him a tired look. You have said that twice today. And you ignored me both times. I may do it again. Despite everything, the corner of his mouth moved. Then he lifted the chair from beneath the latch and opened the door. Deputy Price stood on the porch with snow on his hat and a folded paper in his hand. Behind him waited 2 horses and a young constable named Ben Crowley. Neither man had drawn a weapon. That was something. Owen looked past Elias and saw Clara near the table. Miss Bennett. What am I accused of taking? She asked. Owen unfolded the paper. A private church record belonging to the Red Hollow Council. I have taken nothing. Judge Pike says you entered the courthouse basement last week and asked questions about the old chapel books. Clara frowned. I have not been inside the courthouse in 2 months. Elias stepped onto the porch. Who claims to have seen her? Owen hesitated. The judge's clerk. Name. Martin Vale. Clara's face changed. Elias noticed. You know him. He came to my farm 3 days ago, she said. He asked whether my mother had left me any family papers. Owen looked from Clara to Elias. That was not included in the complaint. Of course it wasn't, Elias said. Owen folded the order again. I still have instructions to bring her in. Tonight, Elias asked, in this weather. The judge says the missing records may be destroyed if we wait. Clara walked to the doorway. Then search my house. Owen looked uncomfortable. I have no order for that. You have an order to take me. Surely Judge Pike would prefer proof. Elias glanced at her. If you take her now, he said, the whole town will wake believing guilt before anyone asks a question. Owen rubbed snow from his jaw. I do not make the orders. No, Clara said, but you choose how blindly you follow them. The words struck him. For several seconds, the deputy stared at the paper in his hand. Then Ben Crowley shifted beside the horses. Sir, the young constable said, we could hold the order until morning. Roads are near covered anyway. Owen looked toward the valley. The storm had weakened, but darkness had settled over the fields. A rider could easily miss the road and end up in the creek. At last, Owen folded the order and pushed it into his coat. You come to the courthouse at 9 tomorrow morning, he told Clara, voluntarily. I will. If you do not, I return with more men. You will not need them. Owen nodded once, then looked at Elias. Keep the door barred. Elias narrowed his eyes. Why? The deputy glanced toward Ben, then stepped closer. Because someone broke into the courthouse basement this afternoon. Clara's breath caught. What was taken? One ledger, the oldest one. The chapel record, Elias said. Owen did not answer directly. Judge Pike claims Miss Bennett took it. She was here. I know. Elias studied him. How? Owen lowered his voice. I passed her farm before the snow began. I saw her crossing toward your place. Clara stepped nearer. Then you know the accusation is false. I know the timing does not fit. Will you say that tomorrow? The deputy looked at her for a long moment. Yes. Relief crossed Clara's face, but Owen was not finished. There is more. Martin Vale has disappeared. The porch fell silent. When was he last seen? Elias asked. Just before noon. He told the stable boy he was riding north. Toward the old chapel? Clara asked. Owen's eyes sharpened. What makes you say that? Clara chose her words carefully. Because that is where the Mercer family secret began. Owen looked from her to Elias, but he did not press. Be at the courthouse in the morning. Then he and Ben mounted and rode into the snow. Elias waited until the hoofbeats faded. He believed you. He believed the clock. That may be enough. They barred the door again. Clara returned to the table and opened Ruth's letter. Her hand moved down the page until she found Reverend Samuel Pike's name. If Martin asked about my family papers, he knew something. He may have found the ledger first. Or Judge Pike used him to remove it. Elias sat across from her. Why accuse you? To make anything I say sound like revenge. Or desperation, Elias added. Clara looked toward the dark window. What if Martin took the ledger and ran? Then why carve the warning into your barn? Perhaps he did not. Elias leaned back. Judge Pike. Or someone working for him. A thought came to Clara. She stood so quickly that the chair tipped backward. My mother's letters. What about them? Martin asked whether she left family papers. Ruth wrote that Samuel Pike kept a record. My mother may have known where another record was hidden. Clara reached for her coat. Elias blocked the door. You are not crossing that field tonight. The letters are in my house. The person who entered your barn may be waiting there. Then come with me. He looked at her. That was already my intention. They left through the back door, carrying one lantern between them. The snow had stopped. Moonlight broke through the clouds and turned the field silver. Their boots sank deep with each step. At Clara's house, nothing appeared disturbed. Elias searched the lower rooms while Clara went upstairs to her mother's old bedroom. She knelt beside a cedar trunk and lifted the lid. Inside lay dresses, dried lavender hymn sheets, and a bundle of letters tied with blue ribbon. Clara opened the last letter her mother had sent. The strange sentence remained near the bottom. Some families begin with blood and some begin with mercy. Most begin with both. This time, Clara noticed small pinpricks beneath several words. Blood. Mercy. Both. She held the paper near the lantern. The holes formed a crooked line toward the lower margin, where her mother had written a single word so faintly Clara had always mistaken it for a smudge. Bell. Elias, she called. He came upstairs. Clara showed him. The chapel bell, he said. It was moved to the courthouse yard after the fire. Not the yard, Elias replied. The bell was too cracked to hang. They stored it in the basement. Clara's heart began to race. What could be hidden inside a bell? A narrow space runs beneath the crown, enough for papers, perhaps. Then the ledger may never have been the only record. A floorboard creaked below them. Both went still. Elias lowered the lantern flame. Another sound came from the kitchen. Not a footstep. A weak knock against the back door. Elias motioned for Clara to remain upstairs and moved down silently. She followed anyway. When he opened the door, a man collapsed across the threshold. Martin Vale. His coat was torn, snow clung to his hair. One hand was wrapped around a small brass key. Elias pulled him inside and checked his breathing. Martin's eyes opened briefly. Pike knows, he whispered. Clara knelt beside him. Knows what? Martin pressed the key into her palm. The bell. His fingers closed over hers with surprising strength. Do not trust the judge tomorrow. Then his eyes slipped shut. From the road beyond Clara's gate came the glow of approaching lanterns. Not one. At least 6. Elias looked through the window and saw riders spreading across the snow. Judge Pike had not waited for morning. The riders stopped beyond Clara's gate. Lantern light moved across the snow, bright against the dark valley. Judge Walter Pike rode at the front in his green coat, the torn edge hidden beneath one gloved hand. Deputy Owen Price was not with him. That told Elias everything. He lowered the curtain. 6 men, he said, maybe 7. Clara looked down at Martin Vale lying near the stove. His breathing remained weak but steady. What does Pike want? The key. Clara closed her fingers around the small piece of brass. A fist struck the front door. Miss Bennett, Judge Pike called, open this house. You are sheltering a wanted thief. Martin stirred. He made me take the ledger, he whispered. Clara knelt beside him. Why? To burn it. His face tightened with pain. I could not. Where is it? Martin's eyes moved toward the brass key. Inside the chapel bell. Elias crouched beside him. Why return here? Pike knew I had spoken to Clara. He sent men after me. Another blow shook the door. Judge Pike's voice hardened. Open now, or we enter by force. Elias stood and reached for the rifle mounted above the mantel. Clara caught his arm. No. I will not let them take you. And I will not let Ruth's truth end with blood on my floor. He looked at her. The fear in her eyes was not weakness. It was courage choosing another road. Clara turned toward the door. We give him what he came for. Elias stared at the key in her hand. You trust him to leave afterward. No. She looked toward the window, where lanterns moved beyond the glass. But Pike believes the key is all that matters. That belief can lead him where we need him to go. Elias understood. The courthouse, The bell. They helped Martin into a chair and wrapped him in a blanket. Then Clara opened the door. Cold air swept into the house. Judge Pike stood on the porch with 3 ranch hands behind him. The others remained mounted near the road. His eyes went immediately to Martin. "So," Pike said, "the thief crawled back to the woman who hired him." Clara held up the brass key. "You came for this." The judge's expression betrayed him for only a moment. Elias saw it. Clara did too. "What does it open?" she asked. Pike stepped closer. "Church property. It opens the old chapel bell." The men behind him exchanged uncertain looks. Pike's mouth tightened. "You have been filling your head with the lies of a dying woman. Ruth Mercer wrote the truth. She wrote rumors. Then you have nothing to fear from opening the bell before witnesses." Snow slipped from the porch roof. Judge Pike looked at the men beside him. He had brought them as strength. Now their presence trapped him. Clara stepped outside. "Let us go to the courthouse." Pike studied her, perhaps searching for fear. He found none. By the time they reached Red Hollow, dawn had begun to pale the eastern sky. News traveled faster than any rider. Lanterns glowed in shop windows. Townspeople gathered near the courthouse steps, wrapped in coats and blankets. Deputy Price stood at the entrance with Ben Crowley beside him. Owen's hand rested near his holster when he saw Pike's men. "What is this?" he asked. "A lawful recovery of stolen property," Pike said. "No," Clara answered. "It is a public opening of a church record." Murmurs moved through the crowd. Caleb Dawson stepped out from beside the bank. His face showed surprise when he saw Clara, then concern when he noticed Elias beside her. "What happened?" "Judge Pike accused the wrong woman," Elias said. Pike pointed toward Clara. "She holds a stolen key." Martin's voice came from the wagon behind them. "I gave it to her." Every head turned. Supported by Ben Crowley, Martin climbed down. "Judge Pike ordered me to remove the old ledger," he said. "He told me to burn it." Pike's face darkened. "He is injured and confused." Martin shook his head. "I kept the ledger inside the cracked chapel bell, where Reverend Samuel Pike hid another record years ago." Deputy Price looked at Clara. "The key." She placed it in his palm. The bell lay in the courthouse basement beneath a canvas sheet. Its bronze surface was blackened from the old chapel fire. A narrow iron plate beneath the crown held a small lock. Owen inserted the key. The lock opened. Inside were 2 bundles wrapped in oilcloth. One was the missing church ledger. The other contained letters, birth records, and a signed confession from Reverend Samuel Pike. Owen read the confession aloud upstairs before the gathered town. Samuel Pike admitted arranging the removal of Martha Mercer's infant daughter to protect several respected families from scandal. He had changed names, hidden a birth record, and accepted money to keep silent. Near the end of his life, he had written the confession but lacked the courage to make it public. Walter Pike had found it years later. He had hidden it again. Justice came quietly. No one dragged the judge through the street. No angry crowd struck him. Deputy Price simply removed Pike's badge from the church council records, placed him under arrest for false accusation, theft, intimidation, and ordering the destruction of evidence, and led him away beneath the eyes of the town whose respect he had valued more than truth. By spring, Clara received a letter from her mother confirming everything Ruth had written. She was not unwanted. She had never been alone. And Ruth had not placed love upon her as a duty. She had only removed the shame that stood in its way. Elias did not propose quickly. He came to Willow Creek each morning. He repaired the barn door. He shared coffee without expecting gratitude. He learned to speak before certainty had finished growing inside him. One evening in May, he found Clara beneath the pear tree. "I know the difference now," he said. "Between what?" "Gratitude and love." She waited. "Gratitude makes a man want to repay a kindness," Elias said. "Love makes him want to become worthy of it every day." Clara's eyes filled, but she smiled. A year later, they married beside the field between their farms. Ruth's blue shawl rested over the back of an empty chair, not as a shadow, but as a place of honor. If this story stayed with you, remember that truth may be delayed, but it is never made smaller by waiting. Like the story, subscribe and share in the comments whether you believe Ruth was right to leave the letter. That evening, Elias and Clara walked home beneath a clear Wyoming sky. The old chapel bell stood in the courthouse yard, cracked but no longer silent. When the wind moved through it, the bell gave one low, imperfect note. Clara took Elias' hand. Behind them lay a town forced to face its past. Ahead stood two homes, one open gate, and a light burning warmly in the window. Elias had once believed love had arrived too late. Clara knew better. Some love does not arrive late. It arrives after the truth has finally cleared the road.